The case of 9 people who died under mysterious circumstances became one of the rare incidents the Soviet Union was never able to officially explain. Or perhaps the real issue was not that they couldn't explain it, but that they chose not to. Because today, a new development forces us to re-examine this story from the very beginning. An official document recovered from a detective's personal archive appears to contradict what authorities originally reported. Something happened that day. Something so terrifying, it gave them no chance to remain inside. In this video, you will see the real photographs taken during the group's final hours, read the notes they kept throughout their journey, and witness the disturbing sequence of events that led to their deaths. Pay close attention to the clues. 10 young hikers had set out to spend their winter break on a demanding but thrilling expedition. Their journey began in Sverdlovsk. From there, they would travel by train, by truck, and eventually continue entirely on foot, following a long and grueling route. At every stage, they documented their progress, writing notes, taking photographs, recording their adventure. Their goal was to cross the Ural Mountains at the height of winter, when the conditions were at their harshest, and reach the summit of Mount Otorten. On the evening of February 1st, 1959, fate would lead them toward death. When the group failed to appear at scheduled points along their route, it became clear that something was wrong. Their families alerted the authorities, and an urgent investigation was launched. On February 26, 1959, 24 days later, search teams made their first major discovery: the tent. The last known photographs, taken on February 1st, show the group preparing to pitch their tent on the slope of the mountain. When it was finally located, the tent was completely covered in snow. More disturbingly, there were deliberate cuts in the fabric. Did this suggest an attack from outside? Even more puzzling, nearly all of the group's equipment and personal belongings remained inside. Backpacks, blankets, warm clothing, even some of their shoes. It was as if something had frightened them so suddenly that they fled without taking anything with them. They had descended toward the forest without their essential gear. And that decision would seal their fate. On February 27th, search efforts intensified. Fearing that fresh snowfall might conceal evidence, rescuers probed the ground with long poles. About 1 kilometer downhill from the tent, beneath a cedar tree, they found the first bodies. Doroshenko and Krivonischenko lay side by side, partially covered in snow. They were wearing only their underwear. They were found. Shortly afterward, along the path leading back toward the tent, the bodies of Igor Dyatlov and Zinaida Kolmogorova were discovered. At that stage of the search, only 4 bodies had been recovered. The others were still hidden beneath the snow, waiting to be found. On March 5, 1959, the 5th body, Rustem Slobodin, was located. He was lying face down, buried under approximately 20 centimeters of snow. The remaining 4 hikers were not discovered until May 4, 1959. Nearly 3 months after their deaths, they were found by chance in a ravine after the snow began to melt, when a local Mansi man was out with his dog near a riverbed. A 3-dimensional reconstruction was later created to visualize the position of these final 4 hikers. Unaware of the fate awaiting them, the 9 hikers had walked into the Ural Mountains and toward their deaths. When we examine everything that happened, there are serious questions that demand answers. Initial suspicion turned toward the indigenous people living nearby. The Mansi, one of Russia's 45 recognized native groups, had survived for centuries through hunting, fishing, and reindeer herding. The area where the hikers were found was known among the Mansi as a sacred mountain, sometimes translated as Dead Mountain. One theory suggested that Mansi hunters had consumed hallucinogenic mushrooms used in shamanic rituals and, under their influence, attacked or frightened the group. Valerie, a Mansi local, later stated, "If someone from our people had committed a crime, they would have imprisoned all of us." The state was harsher back then. Cursed places, negative energy rituals, those were inventions of the media. Following the incident, numerous Mansi individuals were detained and interrogated. No evidence was ever found. The region had hosted expeditions for nearly 30 years without a single similar event. The theory of Mansi involvement was eventually set aside. But what about extraterrestrials? Sanka, now 80 years old and one of the few surviving Mansi witnesses from that era, recalls seeing something unusual in the sky while gathering firewood in February 1959. Many theories emerged about strange lights seen in the sky, yet none were ever officially confirmed by Soviet authorities or any other institution. When we analyze what the Dyatlov group experienced, the idea of an extraterrestrial attack does not appear logical or probable. The hikers' journals contain no mention of anything unusual, no signs of fear related to strange aerial phenomena. However, during that period, the Soviet Union was conducting secret rocket tests. Some were related to space exploration, others to military development. These operations were highly classified. It is possible that, by coincidence, one of these tests occurred near the area where the group was camping. When Zolotaryov's camera was examined, several photographs stood out as particularly intriguing. The images were taken at night. In one photograph, only the heads of some group members are visible, with a bright light source in front of them. In another, a flashlight beam appears to illuminate an area roughly 10 meters away. In a subsequent frame, the photographer seems to have moved closer to that illuminated spot. Where the light falls, there appears to be something resembling a fragmented piece of metal. Other images have been interpreted by some as showing an aircraft or a rocket. But under normal circumstances, an airplane flying at night in a remote area without artificial lighting would not appear so bright and clearly defined in a photograph. Furthermore, the object in these images appears inconsistent. In one frame, it resembles an aircraft. In the other two, it looks completely different, almost like a piece of debris falling to the ground, captured from much closer to the camera. It is important to note that these photographs were taken before February 1st. Some theorists proposed the following: an explosion occurred near their location, possibly a military test. The group may have witnessed something they were not meant to see and captured it on camera. Afterward, they were allegedly followed and killed somewhere in the Ural Mountains. At first glance, this theory might seem plausible. However, the distribution of the bodies across the terrain, the nature of their injuries, and the complete absence of footprints other than those belonging to the group effectively invalidate it. None of the hikers mentioned an explosion or anything extraordinary in their diaries. The only object that could glow brightly enough to appear clearly on a camera in the darkness of night would be a fire, and in some of the photographs, certain fragments appear to be embers that are close to burning out. The group most likely built a large fire. The earliest photograph may have captured it at its brightest. Later, some materials they threw into the fire burned and scattered around. It remains unclear whether Zolotaryov took those photographs simply to capture an impressive fire or as an experiment in night photography. As the investigation continued, an important detail regarding the tent emerged. The cuts in the tent fabric were determined to have been made from the inside, not from the outside. So, what forced them to flee the tent? We know the Dyatlov group carried a portable stove for heating. Their abrupt escape raises the possibility that a fire or smoke may have started while they were asleep. In such a scenario, slashing the tent from the inside would have been the fastest and most logical way to escape. However, there were no burn marks inside the tent. If there had been a fire, the tent would not have been found intact. That leaves the possibility of smoke. Yet even then, abandoning all their belongings and descending into the forest would make little sense. Smoke could have been checked and the situation controlled, allowing them to return to the tent. Clearly, something else was involved. Now to the traces of radiation found on some of the bodies. Significant levels were detected on Alexander Kolevatov and Yuri Krivonoskenko. Importantly, the radiation was measured on their clothing, not within their body tissues. This led to numerous conspiracy theories, including claims of a nuclear missile explosion or death due to nuclear contamination. However, later evidence does not support these claims. Yuri had worked at the Mayak nuclear facility. Kolevatov had previously worked at a nuclear research institute and had been in contact with nuclear fuel and sensitive materials. These facts were confirmed through documentation. No radiation was found on any of the other group members. This detail is crucial, as it explains why only Yuri and Kolevatov showed radioactive contamination. In other words, The radiation theories collapse under scrutiny. There was no environmental data or physical evidence in the area to support a nuclear event. A newly uncovered document related to the Dyatlov Pass case significantly challenges the established timeline of events. Retrieved from a detective's personal archive and dated February 15, 1959, the document contains a critical detail that contradicts the official account. According to official records, search and rescue operations began on February 20th. The group was not located until February 26th. Yet this document suggests that authorities were aware of the Dyatlov group's disappearance and possibly that something had happened to them days earlier. If this is accurate, then the deliberate delay in initiating the search must be seriously questioned. It appears that the incident may have been kept quiet for nearly a week. Perhaps this was a precaution deemed necessary under Soviet conditions at the time. Or perhaps it was negligence. In my view, the idea that someone committed a crime and successfully concealed it leans more toward conspiracy speculation. So, what actually happened? Based on the accumulated investigations and analyses, the most probable conclusion, with approximately 90% likelihood, is grounded in the timeline. Igor Dyatlov and Zenaida recorded diary entries every evening after dinner. On February 1st, no diary entry or note was written. This strongly suggests that whatever occurred happened either before dinner that evening or immediately afterward. When I evaluate all possibilities, the most logical explanation, in my view, is that a slab avalanche occurred, more precisely, a hard snow layer shifted and collapsed onto them. As a result, several members sustained severe injuries, which explains the trauma found on some of the bodies. In the aftermath, they likely panicked and tried to escape the tent to breathe. They slashed the tent open with a knife. Investigators confirmed there were cuts made from the inside outward at 2 separate points. They exited through these tiers. This detail is critical. They needed to get out immediately and either could not reach the entrance in time or did not have the opportunity to do so. Once outside, they must have realized the tent was no longer usable or that repairing it would require too much time. They did not have that time. The weather was brutally cold, and from the previous day's conditions, we know there had been a severe blizzard. The most rational decision was to move to the nearby forest, build a fire, and attempt to warm themselves. Here is the key point. The footprints found outside the tent were orderly. There was no sign of chaotic fleeing. They exited urgently, but proceeded toward the forest in a controlled manner. This suggests that after the initial shock, they regained composure. However, once in the forest, due to the blizzard, wet wood, and extreme conditions, they were unable to sustain an effective fire. Hypothermia began to impair judgment. They were forced to make rapid decisions. Some descended deeper into the forest, searching for shelter. Others may have disagreed and decided to attempt returning to the tent to retrieve clothing and protect themselves from the cold, perhaps even to repair it. Tragically, those who went lower into the forest found no viable shelter. Doroshenko and Krivonischenko, who remained near the cedar tree, could not make it back toward the tent. Their clothing was the least adequate for the weather conditions. They managed to start a small fire, but it was insufficient. The wind was so strong that they tried shielding the flames with their hands. They held their hands so close to the fire that burns formed, yet they likely did not feel them due to the numbing cold. There, under the brutal sting of freezing temperatures, their lives ended. The remaining 3 made a final attempt to return to the tent. Dyatlov and Slobodin did not succeed. Zenaida became the last one still alive. She passed by the bodies of her friends, who had been alive only shortly before, and made one final effort to reach the tent. Her body grew heavier. She could no longer feel her face or her hands. Then she stopped. She embraced death like an old companion and drifted into a deep sleep. Nature covered them with snow. Their fate had begun to be written the day they set out. And now we are on the road. We are sitting in compartment 531 on train number 43. Or rather, sitting is not the right word. We have crammed our backpacks with oatmeal, tins, cans, and canned meat. Hey guys, can we play the mandolin on the train? What do you think? Of course we can. By the way, we forgot to buy salt. Igor, where are you? The group promised not to smoke during the journey. I wonder how long they can endure without cigarettes. Honestly, we sang every song we knew and even learned new ones. I wonder what awaits us on this journey. What will we encounter? We arrived in Sarov, Sverdlovsk region. They did not allow us to stay inside the station. The train to Ivda leaves at 18:30, I believe. It might be good to walk around the city until then. They complained about the songs we sang last night. Perhaps this is the only train where singing is forbidden. Thanks to communism. Oh, and by the way, Yuri ended up at the police station after being accused by a drunken passenger of stealing his vodka. Fortunately, nothing could be proven. With time to spare, we visited a nearby elementary school. Lunch was being served, and we were hungry. We spoke with first and second graders. The children became especially attached to Zina. They cried when she left. They did not want her to go. The evening train is about to depart. We are heading to Ivdal. Hello, dear mother, father, Tom, Galia, and Lucia. Greetings from your daughter Zina. I am far from you again. We are in Sarov. How is life? Anything new? We are going camping with a group of 10. I have all the clothing I need, so do not worry about me. See you soon. Goodbye. Big kisses to all of you from Zina. Write to me. I'm looking forward to it. On the morning of January 25th, the Dyatlov group arrived 340 kilometers north of their starting point. We woke at 5:30 a.m. and packed quickly. We barely slept. Honestly, I feel exhausted. We took the first bus toward Vizhay. We had to travel in third-class conditions. The compartment was so cramped with our gear that at one point Nikolai had to rest his foot on Zolotaryov's head. It looked absurdly funny. Later, more adventures followed. The bus left the highway and entered a village. They said it would depart again in an hour. Instead of waiting, we decided to continue on foot. Walking was far more pleasant than that suffocating bus. We happily covered 30 kilometers without even having breakfast. Perhaps fate showed us some mercy. Eventually, the bus caught up and we continued to Vizhay. We arrived around 2 p.m. We will continue tomorrow morning. We are lucky the film Golden Symphony is about to start. We left our belongings at the hotel and went to watch it. The film was wonderful. We went to bed late again, but finally, a proper bed. On January 26, 1959, the group continued from Vizhay toward the 41st settlement. We woke at 9 a.m. It was minus 17 degrees Celsius. We supposedly slept in a hotel. Some shared bunks. Alexander and Yuri slept somewhere between the beds. We had a small breakfast. The tea was served cold, and some complained. Igor Dyatlov grinned and said, "If the tea is cold, try drinking it outside. It'll feel warmer." A truly original thought. We negotiated for a truck to take us to Settlement 41. Finally, we agreed and climbed aboard. At 13:10 we departed, taking one last photo before leaving. We sang songs along the way and talked about love and friendship. Some mailed letters to relatives before departure. Hello, dear citizens of Settlement SWLK. Yesterday we arrived safely in Vizhay. Now we are heading to the starting point by truck. The weather is nice and mild, around 10 to 15 degrees. Everything is fine so far. Sorry I didn't say goodbye. I got carried away with the expedition. All the best to you. Rustam Slobodin. We arrived at Settlement 41 around 16:30. We were warmly welcomed. The staff cooked lunch. We ate well and are now resting. Some went to watch a film in the next room. Others are chatting outside. Tomorrow we move on again. We've been preparing since morning. Temperature is 5 degrees Celsius. Yudin's condition worsened. Inflammation in the nerves of his back. Probably from exposure during the truck ride. We met an elderly man named Slava who will help transport our loads by horse-drawn sled for 24 kilometers. We're waiting for the backpacks to be loaded. We only managed to depart by 4 p.m. The horse moves slowly. Being without a backpack feels wonderful, but in 2 hours we covered only 8 kilometers. Darkness is falling. The delay is due to the horse. Tonight we travel along the Lozva River, then move toward the Ospia. In complete darkness, we found an abandoned village house. We built a fire from wooden planks. A few injured their hands removing nails. For now, everything is fine. After a warm dinner, we joked and laughed until 3 a.m. This may be the last night we sleep in a bed. We woke to the thunderous voices of Yurka and Kolevatov. So far, the weather smiles upon us. It's -8 degrees Celsius outside. After breakfast, some, led by our famous geologist Yuri Yudin, searched for collection materials, but found nothing. Today, Yuri Yudin will leave us due to inflammation. It's sad, especially for me and Zina. But nothing can be done. At 11:45, we resumed our journey, leaving Yudin behind. We moved toward the Lozva River. Snow cover is significantly less than last year. After 6 hours, around 7:30 p.m., we stopped by the Lozva. Tonight is our first night in the tent. The boys are busy with the stove. They're sewing a sheet as a wind barrier. Some argue about sleeping near the stove, too hot. Time to sleep. Tomorrow we move again. Today is Yuri Doroshenko's birthday. Congratulations, you're 21. We continued along the Lozva River and will soon turn toward Ospia. It's -22 degrees Celsius, but beautiful. We saw Mansi tracks along the way. The Mansi are local inhabitants of this region. We took a break. Igor checked the map. Doroshenko and Zolotaryov stared into the distance, lost in thought. We turned left from the Lozva and followed a Mansi hunter's ski trail through the forest toward Ospia. We found many Mansi signs. Temperature is -13 degrees Celsius with a light wind. We gathered firewood and set camp not far from our destination. After breakfast, we continued along the Ospia River. Ice formations slowed us down. We encountered another Mansi structure along the way. Mansi, the word appears more frequently in our conversations. Zina sketches Mansi tree markings in her notebook, trying to decode them. Today is sunnier but colder than yesterday. We left the riverbank trail. The cold of the Ospia is intense. Mansi tracks ended here. Pine trees surround us. Sunset approaches. As always, we set up the tent and built a fire from pine branches. Another day ends. Tomorrow we rise early again. Today the weather worsened. -24 degrees Celsius. Clear skies, thankfully wind from the west, slightly milder. We left around 10 a.m. Following an old Mansi trail. Walking is harder than yesterday. We frequently lose the path. Visibility is low. We advance only 1.5 kilometers per hour. We developed a new method. One person leaves their pack and moves ahead for 5 minutes, then returns. If the direction is correct, we continue that way. By 4 p.m., we must find a campsite. Exhausted, we prepare for the night. Little firewood available. Most branches are damp. We dug a pit with logs to build a fire. Now we eat dinner in a warm tent, hundreds of kilometers from civilization. The sound of the wind outside makes sleep uneasy. This morning we woke late. Kravaniskenko cleans the stove. Rustam accidentally put on a burned jacket and poses for the camera. Honestly, I'm worried. We've left the Ospia behind. We're moving into untouched terrain. Snow reaches 120 centimeters in places. The forest thins. The slope increases. Elevation is noticeable. This was the last entry they recorded at the place where they were last alive. Death found them shortly after. Someone ended up here on the ground. Brother, help me up. I've fallen.